this country was in ashes. Between April and end June, all of the devils, all the demons in the world descended upon Rwanda. And they left behind total destruction. Mayhem. Our bodies littered everywhere, in the valleys, in the hills, in the rivers, on the roads, in the empty houses. This country was a country without hope. Complete breakdown of law and order, complete loss of human value, a state of hopelessness. The world ran away. When everybody knew the killings were happening, the UN pulled out its forces, all the countries pulled out their forces, and they left these gangs of killers to finish our people.
We have every reason to believe that acts of genocide have occurred.
How many acts of genocide does it take to make genocide?
Alan, that's just not a question that I'm in a position to answer.
True that you have specific guidance not to use the word genocide in isolation, but always to preface it with this word acts of.
I have guidance which I try to use as best as I can. I'm not. I have. There are formulations that we are using that we are trying to be consistent in our use of. I don't have an absolute categorical prescription against.
It was a mistake, but that was a mistake. Having made that mistake, at least what the international community could do was to establish a court to do something, and that's what they did. And the fact that you made a mistake in the past cannot influence should not, in my view, influence the credibility of the organization to rectify one's mistake and showing in practice that it means business with justice.
That court, oh God. If it could close tomorrow, I would be very, very happy. That's a court that has been mixed reaction. Let me first say the positive. This court has been very good for this country.
But let me say this, the ICTR really thinks it's important. We are here for the world, for Rwanda. There can be no question about that.
ICTR has been now seen as a credible institution that is really helping the common knowledge of the people to understand that impunity is no longer going to be accepted.
And this is very important because we saw, for example, sometimes we go, for example, it's like Kibuye. You know, there is a lot of people who have been killed there, and a lot of suspects who have been apprehended, and now in the ICTR, for example. For some population, there was unbelievable to see, for example, a mayor or a prefect who was a big person, for example, taken in the court with some policemen taking him, I don't know, someone who they were believing is like a small god. The government of Rwanda was not be able, for example, to apprehend this kind of people. And imagine if even these people were still at large, what kind of threat, for example, it can cause to our country.
Recently, that court acquitted one person who doesn't, he can't even believe it himself. He's called Zed. He was the mastermind of genocide. Everybody, he knows it himself. That's why he stood in the shock when they said he was innocent. I think he must have said, how can I be innocent? I am the author of genocide.
Mr. Ziganrazo, would you please stand? The appeals chamber, sitting in open session, noting the written submissions of the parties and their oral arguments, grants Protais Ziganrazo's 6 and 12th ground of appeal, and enters a verdict of acquittal under counts 2 and 4 of the indictment. Orders, in accordance with rules 99A and 107 of the rules, the immediate release of Protais Ziganrazo and directs the registrar to make the necessary arrangements.
We have had 6 acquittals at the ICTR. It's not a very high percentage compared to a national court, and it's lower than in Gacaca. If you look at the percentage there, of course, the Gacaca acquittals percentage is much higher. It's a normal thing with all legal proceedings that some persons are acquitted. It is an expression that the institution is not a conviction machine, but a court.
The prosecutor is not there to achieve a conviction at all costs. Their job is to present the evidence, and if the evidence is enough to secure a conviction, brilliant. They'll all go and have a bottle of champagne afterwards. And if it's not, too bad. You know? Whereas, no, my view is that the prosecution here basically do everything they can to get a conviction, and that sometimes results in unfairness, in, I'm sorry to say it, but bad faith at times.
About the ICTR in Arusha, Ibuka really is not a happy one because they didn't really take a lot of people and they have the capacity and the possibility. It's a real system which takes a long time to take someone home. Since 10 years when they start to just have cases, 30 cases only.
But if I count those against disadvantages, I want it to close tomorrow. But that has already been done. Look at the amount of money they have used. I think there are about 45 cases they have tried. By the time they close, maybe there will be about 50 in 15 years.
This is not a UN entity being created. This is a court being created. And the creation of courts is something the UN is not very good at. They did it with the ICJ some 40 years ago. But when it comes at creating new courts with international criminal judges, that was a total novelty.
So when the RPF invaded from Uganda and whatnot in force, there were, okay, even if we're not comfortable with the word genocide, there were mass slaughters of perfectly innocent Hutus. There were massacres of Hutus that represent, if not genocide, then certainly crimes against humanity, that have just not been properly investigated.
And the ones who tried, like Carla del Ponte, have been sacked very quickly and badly.
I do think that this tribunal is independent. I do think that the judicial grounds of the tribunal is totally independent. The fact that a UN court is set up by a political body, be it the ICTY, the Sierra Leone court, the Lebanon court, or the ICTI, in no way influences the approach and the everyday life and the questions of principle of being a court by the judiciary in its active performance of its task.
Whether to prosecute, who to prosecute, when to prosecute, and why to prosecute. Now, to the extent that it is a policy issue, it's very difficult for you to state any criticism, and I will be demonstrating that. That's why I myself, from a pure theoretical point of view, I've always said, even in a national jurisdiction, the decision is political.
In an attempt to keep extending their lifespan, they have used undermining Rwanda's judiciary as a tool to sustain their employment. We find that very immoral.
There was a lot of disruption of the whole judicial system. But even before the genocide, it appears that justice was not taken very seriously in this country.
So the government that came in had very serious challenges. And one of the biggest one was how to deal with the question of justice. How do you deal with justice where the whole population virtually has participated in genocide? How do you deal with a situation where there are no judges at all? There are no prosecutors. There are no police officers. And you have arrested and detained more than 200,000 people, charged with genocide and mass murder. So that was the situation in Rwanda. And then there was the word from the West. Justice today is justice tonight. Of course, everybody knows that. It's the first statement in law school. But how do you give that justice? He said, no. You must find a way. He said, tell us how. He said, we must try them. He said, with who and how? So this question was really a serious question. Before the advent of our colonial masters, we had a system in place called the gacaca, where people sat on the grass under the trees. They listened to problems. The muchacha is the type of grass to deal with the gacaca with three main missions. One, to deal decisively a permanent blow to the culture of impunity. Nobody could do crime like genocide and get away with it. Two, to reconcile the people, the victim and the perpetrator, and to recreate social cohesion, social interaction between the people.
The questions we are facing now about the churches are people not to get the testimony have traumatized, to get that traumatized. When you ask a survivor why you go to the church, and he tell you I go there because the government wants it. I want us to show that we don't really have real confidence about the church.
kandi muri ba bandi bagize inyangamugayo ziburanisha izo manza bamwe muri bo nabo bakoze jenoside cyangwa abana babo barayikoze cyangwa abagabo babo.
Even people who are in your church, which we saw tomorrow, two judges, the judges in your church, some of them did the genocide or their children did genocide.
Going through the church, for the first time, people are able to know the truth, how it was planned, who planned it, who participated, who was paying the people doing it, who hid where, who buried them in a church, who put them in a river. The truth about what happened there could only happen through the church, open. Everybody is a participant. Anybody who knows anything about it will come and talk about it.
These days we just want truth. We already forgiven. We just want to. We are now in the unity and reconciliation time, so we just want to know through what's happened, how we care our people, and whether we just forget. We don't have any problem with them.
Otherwise,
we used to live with them before, even they killed, and some of them they accept they get this is the punishment. So we live with them together. Even they come, we're gonna live together again.
Over 1,000 years, people that intermarried, the so-called Hutu married the so-called Tutsi woman, and vice versa. What would their children be? Are they Hutu? Are they Tutsi? Are they Hutsi? Are they Tubu? What are they? How about their children if they remarry? And one who marries a Tutsi, a Hutsi, a Hutu, what product will they have? Over 1,000 years. So these are myths. Primitive politicians use this to divide our people.
יש מתחים. הם לא יגידו לכם את זה, אבל אני חושב שזה מאוד ברור שיש מתחים. יש, כן, בעיקר במדבר זה בא לידי ביטוי די ברור. לא יעזור כלום, אני לא אומר שזה, אני לא מציין את זה כעובדה שיפוטית, אלא כתיאור מצב. יש קושי בלתי רגיל להכיל אחד את השני. ויש ניסיון אדיר שמתחיל מהנשיא עצמו, מקגאמה, לעשות מה שרק ניתן בשביל ליצור איזה reconciliation.
We hope that we are contributing to justice in Rwanda. We hope that we can make a timid contribution to reconciliation in Rwanda.
Do you genuinely think that this is the right way of bringing about reconciliation in Rwanda, where the International Tribunal trying the alleged leaders of the genocide are really only trying one side?
And the other second mandate, which is of a political nature, was to have us, through the judicial output, to contribute to the national reconciliation process in Rwanda and to help restore security and maintain peace not only in Rwanda, but also in the Great Lakes region.
The victims and the perpetrators are living in the same communities, and they're not killing each other. It does not mean that they are happy with each other. It does not mean that they are comfortable. But they have learned to say that it's better that we live together than that we kill each other.
Yeah.